It was a Tuesday morning when Walter Holloway heard the word that would change everything. He wasn't supposed to be awake yet. That was part of the new routine. Sleep in, rest up, don't worry about things anymore. But old habits don't go quietly, especially not in a man raised on 5 a.m. wake-ups, who'd spent his life fixing the broken things in other people's minds. He sat at the edge of his bed, pulling on his boots like he'd done every morning for 60 years. His joints popped in protest, but his mind was clear, sharp as a tack, just like it always had been. He wasn't sure if that clarity was a blessing or a curse anymore. Down the hall, the kitchen was already alive with the clatter of breakfast. The smell of fried eggs and fresh coffee drifted through the air. Walter followed it, his steps slow but steady. He paused just before turning the corner. He heard voices. "You've got to keep pushing the paperwork, Nathan. The old man doesn't even realize what's going on," said Vanessa, her voice low and tight. "I'm pushing it. But he's slower than I expected. He still asks about the ranch books, and he won't sign anything without reading it twice." "Well, maybe it's time to have another doctor take a look at him," Vanessa replied. "Someone who understands the urgency." Nathan scoffed. "He's a senile old man. He thinks he's still in charge, but he barely remembers what day it is." Walter stood frozen. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but there it was, plain and brutal. Senile old man, not just an insult, a strategy. The voices drifted further into the kitchen, but Walter didn't move. The hardwood floor under his feet felt colder than usual, like it had pulled the heat right out of his bones. They thought he was losing it. Worse, they were betting on it. He backed away, silent as a ghost, and returned to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the family photo on the dresser. His late wife, Margaret, smiled from behind the glass, her eyes bright, her hair pulled back the way she always wore it on Sundays. Beside her stood Nathan, just a boy in that photo, 8 or 9 maybe. The kid had his whole future in front of him. Walter remembered that boy, the one who cried when he skinned his knees, the one who clung to him at night after thunderstorms, the one he worked double shifts for just to afford that first bicycle. Now that boy was calling him senile behind his back. Walter exhaled slowly. His mind wasn't racing. It was calculating. It always had been. He didn't yell, didn't stomp. He just noted. There was something darker happening beneath his roof. This wasn't just impatience or careless words. This was planning. Vanessa's tone had made it clear. This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. They were organizing something, manipulating something. Him. He stood, walked to the closet, and reached behind an old canvas coat. His fingers found the edge of a black metal box, small and heavy. Inside were things most people wouldn't find interesting: old notes, extra keys, 2 pocket-sized tape recorders, and a couple of flash drives he hadn't touched in years. But it was the notebook he pulled out, thick with pages, yellowed at the edges. He'd used it to track patient sessions in his early days, long before everything went digital. Now he figured it would serve another purpose. He flipped to a clean page and wrote, August 12th. Overheard Nathan and Vanessa planning something involving legal paperwork. Called me senile. Vanessa suggested another doctor. Possibility of manipulation or fraud. Must investigate. Do not confront yet. Stay quiet. Observe. He stared at the words a moment longer, then closed the notebook and tucked it under the mattress. Walter knew what people expected of men his age. Fuzzy memory, soft hands, unsteady voices. They expected slow decline and quiet compliance. They wanted him to slip into the background and make room for the next generation, like a piece of furniture too heavy to throw out, but too old to use. But Walter Holloway had never been background, not in his marriage, not in his work, and certainly not on his land. If Nathan thought the old man was too slow to notice, he'd made his first mistake. Walter walked over to the window, pulling the curtain slightly aside. Outside, the ranch stretched for miles, golden fields waving in the breeze. It was still his name on the deed, still his decisions that had kept this place afloat during droughts, debt, and market crashes. He wasn't just sentimental about the land. He'd built it, and now his only son was trying to take it. Walter knew what came next. He'd seen these stories unfold in the families of his former clients. Greedy children, power struggles, mental fitness weaponized like a knife. He'd counseled others through it, but he never imagined it would be his turn. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that he hadn't seen it coming, not from Nathan, not from his own blood. But he wasn't about to go quietly, not yet, not ever. Walter pulled a drawer open and removed a small camera, the kind you could tuck into a bookshelf without anyone noticing. One of several he'd bought years ago, just out of curiosity. He hadn't installed them then. He didn't trust gadgets much. But now? Now seemed like the right time. Let them talk, let them scheme. He'd be listening. Walter Holloway hadn't always been a quiet man. There were days, long gone now, when his voice could carry across the entire south field like thunder, barking orders to ranch hands and sweet encouragement to a nervous young boy learning to ride a skittish horse. That boy was Nathan, his only son, his pride, his burden. Now, sitting alone at the kitchen table with yesterday's coffee, lukewarm and bitter, Walter found himself remembering the small hands that used to reach for his, the wide eyes that used to search his face for approval. It felt like another lifetime. He hadn't been a perfect father, God knows no one is. But he had given everything. When Margaret got sick, he held the family together with duct tape and stubbornness. He paid for Nathan's college, even when it meant refinancing the ranch. He sold off his herd 1 year just to cover tuition, and never once brought it up again. Nathan had been smart, always was. Not book smart in the classic sense, but slick, resourceful. He could charm his way through any situation, even as a teenager. Teachers forgave his missed assignments because he smiled just right. Margaret used to laugh about it, call him our little politician. Walter hadn't laughed. He saw something different in Nathan, even back then, a hunger, an edge. The boy was ambitious, sure, but not in a way that built things. Nathan didn't want to earn. He wanted to own. He didn't want to work the land. He wanted to own the deed and let others break their backs. Still, Walter hoped he'd grow out of it. But hope, he was learning, could be a dangerous thing. It had started small, as these things always do. Nathan calling less often after college, staying in the city longer, making excuses during holidays, and then came the job at that mid-sized development firm in Boise. Salary, suits, business cards with his name embossed in gold. Walter visited once, just once, and left feeling like a tourist in his own son's world. Then came Vanessa. She was beautiful, elegant, cold. From the beginning, she looked at Walter with that careful smile people reserve for strangers they have to tolerate. "She's just not used to our way of life," Margaret had said once, trying to smooth things over. Give her time. But time didn't warm her. If anything, it cooled Nathan too. Every visit to the ranch after their wedding was shorter, more transactional. Nathan would ask about the accounts, the land value, the insurance policies. He stopped asking how his father was feeling and started asking what he was planning. Walter had chalked it up to adulthood, careers, stress, distance. He told himself it was normal, that families change, even if it hurts. But now, years later, sipping bitter coffee alone, Walter saw it clearly. Nathan hadn't changed. He'd revealed himself. And Walter had been too proud or too blind to see it. He pushed the mug away and stood up, walking slowly toward the hallway lined with photographs. Most of them were black and white, faded around the edges. Here was Margaret holding baby Nathan in a hospital room, her eyes tired but joyful. There was a photo of Walter, much younger, standing with a 6-year-old Nathan on a horse named Murphy. Nathan had one hand in the air, grinning like a rodeo star. Walter was holding the reins, always holding the reins. He stopped in front of a photo from Nathan's college graduation. Walter stood in the middle, one hand on Nathan's shoulder, the other on Margaret's back. Nathan was smiling, but it wasn't the same smile. It was practiced, posed. His eyes were already somewhere else. Walter's jaw clenched. He wasn't naive. He knew what people said about men like him, men who stayed rooted to land while the world kept spinning. They called them stubborn, old-fashioned, out of touch. But Walter had built something real, and he had done it for Nathan. Every fence mended, every horse broken, every night spent balancing the ranch's ledgers, every sacrifice, had been for a future where Nathan wouldn't have to struggle the way Walter had. A future where his son could choose his path without fear. And now that same son was calling him senile, trying to steal the very land built with those sacrifices. Walter rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. Not from tears, there weren't any, but from the weight of disappointment. It was heavier than grief. At least grief honored something lost. This was something poisoned. He walked to the back porch and stepped out into the morning air. The fields were quiet, save for the sound of wind rustling through the dry grass. Ray Boone was out near the fence line, moving slow but steady. The man had worked this ranch for 40 years, and Walter trusted him more than most of his own blood. Walter made a mental note to talk to Ray soon. Not yet, but soon. He sat down on the porch swing, the wood creaking beneath his weight. From here he could see the whole lower pasture. The barn roof shimmered faintly under the sun. The place looked peaceful, untouched. But beneath the surface, the soil had already been disturbed, and Walter had work to do. He wasn't the man he used to be. His knees ached. His memory had holes around the edges, sure, but his instincts, his judgment, those were still sharp. And now they were whispering the same thing over and over. You've been patient long enough. Now it's time to protect what's yours. The bank smelled like lemon polish and cold air conditioning. It was the kind of sterile space where money changed hands with plastic smiles and faint tension. Walter had always hated banks, not out of distrust, but because they reminded him of every fight he and Margaret had ever had about bills, loans, and whether they'd make it through the next dry season. Still, here he was again, pressed jeans, clean shirt, walking with his slow, deliberate stride across the lobby of Sage Valley Regional Bank. He tipped his hat to the receptionist, who gave a polite but distant smile, the kind you give to someone who looks familiar but isn't worth the effort of remembering. "Good morning, Mr. Holloway," said the young man behind the counter. "Connor, according to the badge. Can I help you with something today?" "I need to go over some paperwork," Walter said. "Transactions from the ranch account, and I'd like to speak with the branch manager if she's in." Connor's expression faltered for a second, just a flicker, then returned to neutral. "Of course, Miss Fields is in her office. Let me see if she's available." Walter nodded, taking a seat near the window. He watched the cars pass outside as he waited, letting the silence fill the space where suspicion had been growing for weeks. He hadn't planned on coming to the bank, not today, but something about Nathan's tone and Vanessa's push for a new doctor had set off an old alarm in his gut, a quiet kind of dread, the kind he'd learned to listen to. He wasn't a man who jumped at shadows, but he was a man who watched them move. A few minutes later, Connor returned and led him into a small office, where Shelley Fields, the branch manager, stood to greet him. She was in her early 40s, hair in a tight bun, glasses perched perfectly, polite, competent, and, he hoped, honest. "Mr. Holloway, always a pleasure. What can I help you with?" "I'd like a printout of all activity from my main operating account for the ranch. Last 90 days, he said, settling into the chair. "And anything tied to power of attorney documentation. If anyone's been signing on my behalf, I want the names and signatures." She hesitated, but only briefly. "Is there a concern, sir?" "I'm not sure yet. That's why I'm here." 10 minutes later, Shelley returned with a folder, thicker than Walter expected. She handed it to him with both hands, then took her seat across from him, silent and professional. Walter flipped through the pages slowly, scanning line after line. At first it looked routine. Feed purchases, veterinary expenses, a few wire transfers to familiar vendors. Then midway through, he paused. $8,500 transferred to H&H Consulting. Authorized by Nathan Holloway. $12,300 investment account initiation. Signed, W. Holloway. Power of attorney, Nathan Holloway. He frowned. That second line. That was his name, but not his handwriting. He flipped to the attached authorization document. It had been signed 2 weeks ago. The signature, it looked like his. The curve on the W, the angular H, but it wasn't right. He knew his own lines, the pressure of his pen. This was close, too close. Someone had practiced. Shelley must have noticed his expression shift. "Something wrong?" "This isn't my signature," Walter said, tapping the page with his finger. "That's not me. I didn't authorize this." She leaned forward, examining the page again. "It came through digitally. Part of an e-signature package your son initiated. It was processed using his access credentials." Walter sat back in his chair. His mind was quiet, not panicked, not angry. Just alert, the way it used to feel before a patient finally admitted the truth he'd been circling around for months. "This was never discussed with me," he said. "None of this was. I want copies of everything, today." Shelley nodded. "Of course. I'll have it scanned and printed for you before you leave." Walter stood slowly, tucking the initial pages under his arm. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't rise. But the truth had settled in now. This wasn't just scheming. This wasn't just disrespect. This was fraud. Nathan hadn't been waiting for Walter to step aside. He'd started pushing him out already, quietly, carefully, with forged signatures and backdoor transfers. It was the kind of theft you could only pull off if you knew the victim would stay quiet, or if you believed they wouldn't notice. Nathan was betting on senility. He was going to lose that bet. As Walter stepped out into the bright midday sun, the heat hit his face like a slap. He blinked against the glare, but inside, everything was cooling fast, cold, precise. A switch had flipped. He wasn't going to confront Nathan, not yet. First, he'd gather everything, copies, records, a timeline. He'd track it all the way to the source. Not to punish, not yet, but to prove. And once he had the full picture, once every name and signature and timestamp had been accounted for, then he'd act. Not as an angry father, but as a man protecting his legacy. Walter waited until the house was quiet. It was late, just past 10 p.m., and the sounds of the day had finally faded. The television in the living room was off. No more clinking dishes. No more hushed conversations behind closed doors. Nathan and Vanessa had gone to bed in the guest wing, the one Walter had renovated years ago for family comfort. He never imagined it would become a base of operations for betrayal. He sat in his bedroom, the folder from the bank open on the desk beside him. Printed copies, carefully labeled, circled in red ink. Each page a small knife. Together they told a story of deception. Money siphoned off. Signatures forged. Investments opened in his name without his consent. All of it quiet. All of it calculated. He didn't need more proof. He needed a reckoning. Walter stood, walked down the hallway, and stopped outside the door of the guest room. He didn't knock. He opened it. Nathan was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. Vanessa wasn't there, probably in the shower. When he looked up, he offered a casual smile that faltered almost immediately. "Dad, everything okay?" Walter didn't answer. He walked in, dropped the folder on the dresser, and shut the door behind him. Nathan's eyebrows pinched. "What's going on?" "You tell me," Walter said quietly. "You've been real busy lately, haven't you?" Nathan stood, his voice shifting, defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" Walter walked over to the folder and opened it, flipping the first page toward him. "This is a transfer you authorized under my name, and this one," he turned another page, "is a power of attorney form you submitted without my knowledge. That's a forged signature." Nathan exhaled through his nose, a short burst. "Dad, come on. This is just part of the transition. We've talked about moving some things into my name to help manage the... We haven't talked about anything." Walter's voice was steady, low. "You've talked. I've listened. And now I see why." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're making this into something it's not." Walter stepped closer. Not threatening, but present, grounded. "No," he said. "You made it into something it's not. I gave you every opportunity to be honest with me. I trusted you. And you used that trust to go behind my back. You used my name to access my money, my land. You falsified my signature. That's not a mistake, Nathan. That's a crime." Nathan crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic." Walter's voice dropped a note colder. "No, I'm being clear. And for the record, Nathan, you're a terrible forger." There was a pause. A long one. Then Nathan snapped. "You know what? Fine, let's stop pretending," he said, voice rising. "You've been slipping for years, Dad. You forget things. You wander off in your own head. Half the time we don't even know if you're fully present. You've earned retirement, so why not just let go?" Walter stared at him. "Is that what you tell yourself? That this is mercy?" "It is," Nathan snapped. "You've spent your whole life running this place like it's your personal kingdom. But it's falling apart. You think you're still sharp, but everyone sees it. You talk to cattle more than people. You stare out windows for hours. It's not healthy." Walter took a breath. "What you're describing, Nathan, is grief, not dementia. I lost your mother. I lost friends. I lost time. That doesn't mean I've lost my mind." Nathan looked away, jaw clenched. "You're just making it harder on everyone." "No," Walter said. "You're making it easier for yourself." He let that sit. Nathan didn't respond. Walter walked to the dresser and picked up the folder, tapping the pages against his palm. "I've already contacted my attorney and my financial advisor. Every transfer, every document, you're going to have to explain them under oath." Nathan's face went pale, then pink. "You wouldn't do that to your own son." Walter raised his chin slightly. "You already did it to your father." That shut the room down. Cold silence. Only the soft hum of the bathroom fan through the wall. Vanessa appeared at the doorway just then, wrapped in a robe, towel on her head. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp, already sensing she was too late. Walter turned to her but didn't answer. He looked back at Nathan. "You're off the ranch by the end of the week," Walter said. "You can take your things, but the accounts are locked and your access is revoked. I'll be filing formal charges if this continues." "You can't just cut me out," Nathan barked. "I'm not cutting you out," Walter replied. "You walked away a long time ago. I'm just closing the door behind you." He turned, walked past Vanessa without a word, and headed down the hallway. His hands weren't shaking, his breath was steady, but his heart, His heart was cracked open, split down the middle like a branch in a lightning storm. Because even when you expect the betrayal, even when you see it coming, it still wounds like hell. But it also sets things in motion, and Walter Holloway had just drawn his line in the dirt. The next morning brought the kind of heat that clung to your skin before the sun had even cleared the horizon. Walter stood by the barn door, a coffee mug in hand, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. He hadn't slept much. After the confrontation with Nathan, something inside him had shifted. Not just the anger, but the clarity. It was the kind of mental sharpness that came not from peace, but from war. There was no going back now. He heard boots on gravel behind him. Ray Boone walked up, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded bandana. His shirt was half-buttoned, his hat pulled low. He didn't say anything right away. Ray was never one to fill silence without cause. Walter spoke first. "Got a minute?" Ray nodded. "Always." They walked to the side of the barn where the early morning sun hadn't yet reached. The shade was cool, but the air between them was weighted. Walter took a sip of his coffee and stared straight ahead. "They've been trying to get me out," he said finally. "Not just the accounts, not just the paperwork. They're making a case that I'm mentally unfit." Ray was quiet a moment. "Hell," he said softly. Walter turned to him. "Have you heard anything? Anyone talking?" Ray shifted his stance. He looked uncomfortable, like a man who's been sitting on something too long and now has to decide whether to spit it out or swallow it. "A week ago," Ray said, "I overheard Vanessa talking to the vet when he came to check the calves. She was asking if he knew any doctors in town who'd be willing to do a wellness check on you. Said you'd been confused lately, forgetting things. Seemed like she was fishing." Walter's jaw tightened. "And?" "She said they needed it documented. For legal reasons, she called it." Walter took a breath, the kind that expands the chest but deflates the heart. "They're building a case," he said, "trying to get a medical declaration. If they can prove I'm not mentally competent, they can contest anything I do, change the will, take control of the land. Hell, they might even try to put me under guardianship." Ray's face darkened. "That's not just betrayal. That's a hit job." Walter gave a tight nod. "And it explains the patience, the pretending, the politeness. They've been waiting for me to slip. And when I didn't, they decided to manufacture the fall." Ray kicked at a loose stone with his boot. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "I didn't know what they were up to exactly. Figured maybe it was just more of their usual crap." Walter put a hand on Ray's shoulder. "You told me now. That's what counts." They stood there for a moment in silence, two men weathered by decades of labor and life. No need for over-explaining. Trust didn't need many words. Then Walter asked, "You still got the security cameras up?" Ray nodded. 3 still working, 1 on the front drive, 1 in the barn, 1 above the back porch. Never bothered taking them down. Walter's eyes sharpened. "Can you hook them into my phone?" Ray smiled for the first time that morning. "Already done." Walter raised an eyebrow. "After Nathan started hanging around the ledger room, I figured better safe than sorry," Ray said. "Didn't want to say anything unless something came up." "It's come up," Walter said, voice low. He looked out over the ranch. The land still looked peaceful, unchanged, but now he knew better. The danger wasn't on the horizon. It was inside the house. Ray cleared his throat. "You want me to talk to Dr. Kimball? He's the only one I'd trust to give you a fair exam if it ever comes to that." Walter shook his head. "Not yet. No exams, no doctors. If I walk into a clinic now, they'll twist it. Say I'm paranoid. Say I'm lashing out. Right now, the smartest thing I can do is keep my mouth shut and my eyes open." Ray nodded in agreement. "What do you need from me?" "Loyalty," Walter said. and silence. You already got both. Walter drained the last of his coffee and handed the mug to Ray. Then let's get to work. If they're going to treat me like I'm invisible, I might as well start acting like it. Ray chuckled under his breath. Ghost in the walls, huh? Exactly, Walter said. Let them talk. Let them plot. Let them underestimate me. He turned, headed toward the house, each step measured. The morning heat was rising, but Walter felt colder than ever. Not afraid, just focused. Because now he understood. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about erasure, and he wasn't going to let them bury him while he was still breathing. Walter had never liked sweets much, but there was something comforting about the cinnamon rolls at Maggie's diner. Maybe because Margaret used to love them, or maybe because the place hadn't changed in 30 years. Same yellow booths, same faded Coke signs, same old lady at the register who still called him darling, even though he hadn't been that in decades. He chose the back corner booth, away from the windows, where the light came in soft and sideways. He wasn't here for coffee and carbs. He was here for a man who, once upon a time, used to carry a badge and a pistol, and who now carried something just as valuable, perspective. Earl Maddox walked in 5 minutes late, limping slightly, still wearing the same brown leather jacket Walter remembered from therapy sessions 15 years ago. His beard was grayer now, but his eyes hadn't dulled. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much and stopped pretending otherwise. Walt, he said, sliding into the booth without waiting to be invited. Earl, Walter replied, you're limping worse than last time. Arthritis keeps me humble. Walter cracked a small smile. That ever worked on you? Not once. The waitress came and went. Coffee was poured, orders placed, small talk avoided. Earl took a sip and waited. He knew Walter well enough not to ask too many questions up front. It was a skill he'd learned when Walter was still his therapist, back when Earl was wrestling demons from 20 years on the force. Now the roles were reversed. Walter took out the folder. Not the originals. He'd locked those away. Just copies. Enough to tell the story. He pushed it across the table. Earl didn't flinch. He opened it, flipped through a few pages, and then stopped at the signature line on a forged document. Jesus, he muttered, that's a felony. Walter nodded. And that's your son's name at the bottom? Another nod. Earl leaned back and sighed. Well, damn. I always thought that one came off a little too slick. Walter didn't rise to it. He just waited. Earl put the papers down, folded his hands. You brought me here because you want advice or protection? Both, Walter said, but mostly clarity. I need to know where this road leads if I keep walking it. Earl scratched his beard. Well, for starters, what they've already done is enough to press charges. Forgery, financial exploitation, abuse of power of attorney. Hell, if you really want to push, there might be grounds for elder abuse. I don't want to push, Walter said. I want to prepare. Earl narrowed his eyes. So you're not planning to go to the sheriff? Not yet. I need more. Something solid, undeniable. Earl nodded slowly. Then you need to record everything. Time-stamped, verified. Audio, video, documents. Anything that shows intent and deception. Because the moment you move, Nathan's going to play the same card everyone plays when they get caught stealing from their daddy. Walter said it with him. He's not well. He's confused. He's not of sound mind. Earl gave a bitter laugh. Exactly. They both went quiet for a moment as the waitress brought 2 plates. Cinnamon rolls steaming, butter melting. Neither man touched them. Walter leaned in. They're already laying groundwork. Ray overheard Vanessa talking to a vet, fishing for referrals. They're shopping for a doctor willing to call me incompetent. Earl's face darkened. That's not just sneaky, that's coordinated. I know, Walter said. That's why I need help. I don't want a gun. I don't want a bodyguard. I want someone who knows how these things fall apart and how to stop them before they do. Earl sipped his coffee. You still got the cameras on the property. Ray set them up. One's aimed at the barn, one at the drive, one on the back porch. We're working on getting more. He's feeding it to my phone. Good. Keep them rolling. And don't tell anyone else, especially not the grandkids. Walter nodded, but his face grew distant at the mention of them. Jack started pulling away from his dad. I think he suspects something's wrong. Earl raised a brow. That's good, but don't involve him yet. He's still a kid. He needs to stay that way as long as he can. Walter nodded again. I don't want to win this and lose them. You won't, Earl said, firm now. Not if you do it right. You let the facts speak, not emotion, not revenge, just truth. Walter exhaled, as if the weight of the last few weeks had settled deeper into his chest. Earl, do you think I waited too long? No, Earl said without hesitation. You waited long enough to be sure. That's the right kind of waiting. Walter finally picked up his fork, tore a corner off the cinnamon roll, and chewed it slowly. It tasted like nothing, but something about having it on the plate made him feel grounded. I'm going to need you close, he said. Not every day, just when things move. They're moving now, Earl said. You feel it, don't you? Walter looked out the window at the dusty street. Yeah, I feel it. He didn't say it out loud, but something inside him clicked into place in that moment. This was no longer about betrayal. It wasn't about signatures or money or even power. This was about agency, the right to remain himself, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even his own son, take that away from him. The cameras were silent, discreet, and deadly. Walter sat in the old study at the back of the house, the one Margaret had once used for paying bills and writing Christmas cards. Now, it had become a war room. The desk was cleared of everything but a laptop, a yellow legal pad, and his phone, which buzzed gently each time a motion sensor triggered one of the 3 live feeds Ray had installed. He watched the screen like a hawk, not obsessively, but deliberately. No rushing, no reacting, just recording. This wasn't anger anymore. This was evidence. Over the last few days, Nathan and Vanessa had been careless, too comfortable, too convinced Walter was retreating into his quiet routines, too confident that their manipulation was working. They didn't know they were being watched. Wednesday, 6:12 p.m., Walter watched them on the back porch. Nathan was drinking from a tumbler of something amber, while Vanessa sat with her legs crossed, one hand gesturing sharply. He's dragging his feet on signing the medical directive, Vanessa said. He's suspicious. He's always suspicious, Nathan replied. But it doesn't matter. I found an old intake form from the neurologist Mom saw when she was sick. I'm going to fill it out like it came from Dad. Send it in, get it on record. Vanessa leaned forward. That's forging medical documents. Technically, Nathan shrugged. But who's going to challenge it? If he does, they'll say he's paranoid. If he doesn't, it holds up. Either way, we win. Walter pressed the screen record button. Thursday, 2:37 p.m. A car arrived, not one Walter recognized. A man in a blazer and slacks stepped out holding a briefcase. Vanessa met him at the drive and led him inside. The feed above the porch caught the audio faintly. Just a general evaluation, she said. Nothing formal yet. We just need someone willing to say there's been cognitive decline. The man's voice was clipped. You understand? I can't write anything definitive without a formal session. Of course, she said. We'll arrange that. This is just Groundwork. Legal housekeeping. Walter made a note on his pad. Psych eval attempt. Witness present. Possibly Dr. Linwood. Match license plate. Friday, 7:41 p.m. Nathan was pacing the kitchen, his voice louder than usual. "He's tougher than I thought," he said. "He's not slipping like he used to. It's like he's watching now. Like he knows." "He doesn't know," Vanessa said. "You're just being paranoid. He's old. He stares out windows. That's what old people do." Walter smiled faintly in the dark study. She was right about one thing. He was old, but he saw everything. And now he had it all on file. Time-stamped, backed up, synced to a cloud drive Gerald Kim had helped him create under a private alias. The footage was tagged, organized, and quietly forwarded to Tom Barlow, his lawyer. No grand announcements, no threats. Just a digital trail of truce. That Sunday evening, Earl Maddox came by the ranch. Not for a meeting, not for strategy, just to sit. The two of them took their usual chairs on the porch while the fields darkened and the crickets began their slow orchestra. Walter handed him a tablet. "You need to see this." Earl watched in silence for 10 minutes, then exhaled. "They really think you're weak." "That's their blind spot," Walter said. "They stopped seeing me, started seeing a version of me they could control." "You're sitting on a gold mine of testimony," Earl muttered. "You show this in court, there's no way they can argue diminished capacity. Hell, they'll be lucky to walk out without charges." "That's not the point," Walter said. Earl raised a brow. "No?" "The point is," Walter continued, "I needed to know who they really were. I didn't want it from rumor. I didn't want it from guesswork. I needed to see it, hear it. And now I have." Earl nodded slowly. "So what happens next?" Walter looked out over the pasture. The sky had turned that deep blue gray that comes just before the stars appear. His land, his history, still standing. "Next," Walter said, "I stopped being a ghost." Walter didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't from worry. It was clarity. He had the truth on his side now, not just memories or gut feelings, but cold, clean facts. He knew what Nathan and Vanessa were doing. He knew how far they were willing to go, and soon so would everyone else. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the old notebook, flipping to a fresh page. August 24th. Surveillance footage confirms manipulation attempts, psychological targeting, document planning, file uploaded, lawyer informed, waiting for next move. He set the pen down. In the dark, his reflection flickered in the window. Tired eyes, wrinkled skin, but no confusion, no fog, only purpose. Because when people lie, their words are soft, but eyes don't lie. And Walter Holloway had been watching long enough. They came at 9:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. 3 unmarked vehicles pulled onto the gravel drive, kicking up dust that hovered in the morning sun like a warning. At first, Nathan thought it was a delivery, maybe a contractor coming early for the new irrigation install he'd been pushing for. But then he saw the man step out of the lead vehicle. Tom Barlow, suit, tie, leather briefcase, calm eyes, the kind of calm that only meant one thing. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to deliver. Nathan opened the door before they knocked. "What the hell is this?" "Legal notice," Tom said, holding out a thick envelope. "Filed this morning. Judge signed the emergency petition 20 minutes ago." Vanessa appeared behind Nathan, still in her robe. Her eyes scanned the papers as Tom continued. "Effective immediately. Revocation of all power of attorney privileges. Restraining order from all financial accounts tied to Holloway Ranch Enterprises. Motion to investigate fraudulent activity, including forgery, unauthorized transactions, and attempted manipulation of a medical declaration." "What?" Nathan's voice cracked. "This is insane. He doesn't know what he's doing." "He knows exactly what he's doing," came a voice from behind them. Walter stepped out onto the porch, hat in hand, boots planted firm on the wooden steps. He looked smaller than Nathan remembered, older. But the voice? The voice was the same as it had always been. "Morning, son," Walter said. "I suggest you don't lie today. There are cameras running." Nathan's jaw moved, but no sound came out. Vanessa's mouth opened in protest, but Tom raised a hand and spoke over them. "We have hours of footage, audio recordings, witness testimony, bank documents, medical inquiries initiated without consent. This isn't speculation, this is fact. And if you want to contest it, we'll see you in court." "I'm his son," Nathan barked. Walter didn't blink, and that used to mean something. The deputy who had arrived in the second car stepped forward, taking the documents from Tom and reading them aloud. Legal language filled the air like dust, dense, undeniable. Nathan was ordered to leave the property within 24 hours. Vanessa was barred from contact with Walter until the hearing. They stood there, stunned, stripped of the performance they had built their plan around. No more smiles, no more gentle gaslighting, just the truth laid bare. Nathan turned to Walter, eyes blazing. "You're really doing this? To me?" Walter's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "You started this, Nathan. I'm just finishing it." The deputy handed Nathan a copy of the restraining order and gave him the details of the enforcement. Vanessa disappeared into the house without a word. When Nathan finally followed, slamming the door behind him, Walter exhaled. Not in relief. There was no peace in this moment, only confirmation. He had waited long enough. That afternoon, Walter sat in the lawyer's office while Tom went through the next steps. "We have enough to pursue criminal charges," Tom said. "Forgery, financial abuse, attempted fraud, misrepresentation of medical status. The DA won't hesitate." Walter nodded. "Do it. File everything. I don't want revenge, Tom. I want accountability." "You'll have it," Tom said. "It may take a few months, but the court will be on your side. The evidence is clean." Walter glanced down at the folder on the table. Vanessa's voice from the porch recording. Nathan pacing in the kitchen. Dates, times, signatures that didn't match. Truth had weight, and now it had legal teeth. "There's one more thing," Tom said gently. "You'll want to revise your will. As it stands, Nathan is still listed as the primary beneficiary." Walter stared out the window a long moment. He thought of Margaret. He thought of the years they spent raising a boy they believed in, all the sacrifices, all the forgiveness. Then he looked back at Tom. "Cut him out," he said. "Completely." Tom nodded, already reaching for the paperwork. "And the land, the business." Walter thought again, not of Nathan, but of Jack and Lily. Their quiet questions, their uncertain glances. The way Lily had hugged him last summer like she still remembered who he was under all the silence. "Set it up as a foundation," Walter said, "in Margaret's name, for community development, elder support, scholarships. Jack and Lily can have access someday, if they earn it." Tom smiled slightly. "You're a better man than most." "No," Walter said, standing. "Just one who finally opened his eyes." That evening, Walter returned to the ranch. The house felt quiet. Not peaceful, but hollow. Vanessa and Nathan were gone by then, packed up quickly, no goodbyes. He walked room by room, not searching for damage, just breathing the space again. In the upstairs hallway, he paused by a photo he hadn't looked at in years. Margaret, Nathan, and himself, taken the day they signed the papers to buy the ranch in full. Debt-free, 3 smiles, 1 future. He didn't take the picture down. Some ghosts need to stay where they are. He stepped outside, the sun bleeding over the pastures. Ray Boone waited by the truck, his arms crossed, face unreadable. "They're gone," Ray said. "I know," Walter replied. "You okay?" Walter nodded slowly. "No, but I'm right." Ray gave a grunt of approval. Walter looked out at the land, every fence, every trough, every scar in the earth. His life wasn't ending. It was just changing shape. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the ground beneath his feet felt like his again. The air in Tom Barlow's office felt lighter than usual. No tension, no hidden dread, just decision. Walter sat across from him, pen in hand, staring at the final page of the new will. "No rush," Tom said gently. Walter shook his head. "No need to delay. I've waited long enough." He signed. 3 strokes, no hesitation. Nathan Holloway was officially disinherited. The land, the livestock, the house, the equipment, the shares, the investments, everything now belonged to the newly formed Margaret Holloway Foundation, a nonprofit designed to support rural families, elder care, and education initiatives in the region. The mission was simple: to leave behind something that mattered, something that healed, not hurt. Tom reviewed the signatures, then locked the folder away. "You know this will make waves," he said. "I'm counting on it," Walter replied. That afternoon, Walter walked the edge of the north pasture. The wind moved through the tall grass like a whisper, not asking permission, just passing through. Ray caught up to him halfway down the trail. "So," he said, "the place belongs to a foundation now." Walter nodded. "And your son?" "Out, cleanly, permanently." Ray gave a short, satisfied nod. "Good." Walter slowed, placing a hand on the top rail of the fence. This land, it raised him, fed him, protected him, and he tried to bury me in it. Ray didn't speak, but his presence said enough. After a moment, Walter pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it over. "What's this?" Ray asked. "Your official appointment," Walter said. "Executive Director of Operations. The land still needs someone strong on the ground, someone who doesn't flinch." Ray opened the envelope, read the letter, and looked up, speechless. Walter smiled. "It was never just mine, Ray. You helped build it too." Ray cleared his throat, clearly moved. "Well, damn." That night, just as the sun dipped below the hills, Walter received a message on his phone. "Jack, can we come see you?" He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he typed back, "Yes, tomorrow. Come hungry." The little ice cream shop on Main Street still had the same red stools from when Jack and Lily were kids. Walter chose a booth near the back, where the noise from the counter couldn't quite reach. He sat with 2 cones on the table, one vanilla, one chocolate, both beginning to melt. They walked in 5 minutes late. Jack was taller than Walter remembered, more serious. Lily walked beside him, eyes scanning the room, until she saw her grandfather. She smiled, not forced, not polite. Real. Walter stood. Jack gave a quiet nod and sat down across from him. Lily didn't sit. She walked right up and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He hadn't realized how much he needed that hug until it came. "Hi, Grandpa," she whispered. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, voice just a little unsteady. They sat. No lectures, no speeches, just spoons scraping against softening ice cream. After a few minutes, Jack spoke. "Dad said you lied, said you're making this whole thing up." Walter nodded. "I figured he would." Jack looked down. "But you didn't, did you?" Walter met his grandson's eyes. "No, Jack, I didn't lie, but I did wait too long to see who he'd become." Silence again. Then Lily reached across the table and took Walter's hand. "We knew something was wrong. We just didn't know what." I know, Walter said. And I don't blame you for being quiet. You're not responsible for what your parents did. Jack nodded slowly. So, what happens now? Walter took a breath. Now we rebuild, not the land. That's fine, us. He slid a small paper napkin across the table. It had a handwritten address on it. What's this? Lily asked. A cabin, 10 miles west of the ranch. Quiet, safe. It's where I'm going to start something new, and I want you both to be part of it, when you're ready. Jack looked at the paper. Lily smiled again. Then she stood and hugged Walter one more time. But this time, she didn't let go so quickly. The room smelled like old wood and fresh coffee. Walter stood at the front of the community center's multi-purpose room, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the half-circle of gray hair and lined faces in front of him. 10 people, mostly quiet, a few skeptical, all of them over 60. It wasn't a formal group, not yet. Just a few folks who'd answered the flyer taped to the bulletin board. For those who feel invisible, unheard, or underestimated, let's talk. Walter had written it himself. I'm not a therapist anymore, he told them. I'm not here to diagnose or fix anybody. I'm just someone who's been through some things. They waited. My son tried to take everything I had, Walter said plainly. Said I wasn't sharp enough anymore to handle my own life. No gasps, just knowing eyes. He continued. I proved him wrong, but not just with lawyers, with preparation, with people I trusted, and by staying aware, even when they thought I wasn't. A man in the back nodded. Walter smiled slightly. So I thought, maybe we could help each other stay aware of what's happening around us, of what we still are, because we're not done yet. Silence. Then a woman up front spoke. How do you start over at 75? Walter didn't hesitate. You don't start over. You start smaller, and you build from where you are. The hardest part is believing that it's still allowed. She nodded, and just like that, the group began to talk. Stories emerged. A daughter who cut off contact, a brother who pressured for control of land, a neighbor who'd slowly isolated his wife. Walter didn't offer solutions, just listened. And occasionally, gently, he pointed out the patterns they all shared. By the end of the meeting, no one had left, and 2 people asked when they could come back. The group met every Wednesday after that. Word spread. More chairs were added, coffee brewed stronger. Walter became the quiet anchor of something much bigger than himself. Not a preacher, not a hero. Just a man who knew what it was like to be underestimated and how to survive it. One day, a teenager walked in late and stood in the doorway. Lily. Walter smiled. She didn't say anything, just listened. Afterward, she hugged him tight in front of everyone. He didn't need to say a word. The porch creaked softly under Walter's boots as he eased into the chair that had once been Margaret's. Evening light stretched long across the pasture, painting the fence posts gold and the grass pale green. The shadows were taller now, gentler, like him. He held a cup of black coffee, too late in the day for most folks, but not for him. He didn't measure time by clocks anymore. He measured it by quiet, by what stayed. The land was quieter now, no more footsteps behind his back, no more pretending not to notice what was being taken. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Ray was down near the barn, feeding the horses. Jack had called that morning, asking if he could bring Lily by next week. Just to talk, he'd said. That was more than enough. Walter looked at the fields that had once nearly broken him. Droughts, debt, loss, and later, betrayal. But the soil held scars and still gave life. So did he. He took a breath, slow, deep, steady, and let the silence settle. They had tried to write him off, tried to cut him out of his own story. But he was still here, not because he fought louder, but because he stood longer, like an old tree that stops bearing fruit, but still gives shade. Maybe you know someone like Walter, or maybe you are someone like Walter. If you are, you're not invisible, you're not done, you're not too late. The world may try to move past you. Don't let it. Stay rooted. Stay awake. And when the moment comes, stand firm. If this story meant something to you, share it. Tell someone. Start the conversation. Because dignity shouldn't fade quietly. It should echo.